Robert Greene, in his book, The 48 Laws of Power, he presents deep insights into human nature, strategy, and power dynamics. In this 8th session, we explore the final set of laws from law number 41 to law number 48. They emphasize the importance of unpredictability, adaptability, and the ability to maintain control over one's own narrative. So, let's start with the law number 41. Avoid stepping into a great man's shoes. Avoid stepping into a great man's shoes. Robert Greene, in his book, The 48 Laws of Power, he presents law number 41. Avoid stepping into great man's shoes. This law is a powerful lesson for anyone who follows in the footsteps of a great predecessor, whether it is a successful leader, a famous parent, or a legendary figure. It warns that living in someone else's shadow, it limits our potential and prevents us from making our own mark in the world. If we want to achieve true power, if we want to achieve true success and recognition, we must break free from the past and establish our own identity. History proves that what happens first always seems more original and impactful than what follows next. The world remembers pioneers and path breakers, not imitators. If we inherit the legacy of a great figure, we must work twice as hard to outshine them. Simply following their footsteps, it is not enough because the world will always compare. They compare our achievements to their achievements. We must change course, redefine the game, and establish our own distinct path. Consider Alexander the Great, who refused to live under his father Philip II's shadow. Philip was a brilliant strategist who built Macedonia into a military powerhouse. But Alexander understood that if he merely continued his father's legacy, history would remember him as a copy rather than an original. So, he did not just expand his father's empire, he reinvented it. He created a new world, fused cultures, and built an empire that became a legend. He buried the past, made bold moves, and became greater than his father. One of the biggest mistakes we can make is assuming that success is hereditary. A father's greatness does not automatically transfer to his sons. It doesn't. A leader's achievements do not guarantee the success of their successor. If we merely repeat what worked in the past, we risk becoming irrelevant. Circumstances change, challenges evolve, and new solutions are required. Power depends on the ability to adapt, ability to innovate, and ability to fill the void with something new and extraordinary. To break free from the past, we must first understand that inheritance is not an advantage, it is a burden. It creates expectations, it invites comparisons, and it makes us hesitant to take risks. The key to true power is to psychologically start from zero. Even if we inherit material wealth, influence, or a powerful position, We must create something of our own, detach from the weight of history and shape a new future on our terms. There are many ways. There are many ways to escape the shadow of a predecessor. One method is to deliberately distance ourselves from their legacy. This does not mean disrespecting or completely erasing the past, but rather stepping out of its influence. The more we tie ourselves to the past, the harder it becomes to define our own identity. Another method is to create something so unique and groundbreaking that is overshadows everything that came before. Instead of being remembered as a successor, we must strive to be remembered as a creator. But however, power is a cycle. Just as we rise by breaking away from the past, others will eventually try to do the same to us. New leaders will emerge, the young will rebel, and the cycle will continue. And the cycle will continue. The wise understand this reality and prepare for it. They remain adaptable, always reinventing themselves and never allowing the weight of history to trap them in complacency. Ultimately, the greatest lesson of law number 41 is that we are not bound by the past. We are not defined by our predecessors. Nor are we limited by their achievements. Our destiny is in our hands. Our destiny is in our hands. True power comes from the courage to carve our own path. The world does not remember those who simply follow in the footsteps of great days, but it remembers those who dare to create their own legacy. This is law number 41. Now let's turn to law number 42. Strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. Robert Greene, in his book, The 48 Laws of Power, he presents the law number 42. Strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. This law reveals a crucial truth about influence and control. Trouble often originates from a single individual, a steerer, a disruptor, or someone who thrives on chaos. If this person remains unchecked, their influence spreads like wildfire. It creates discontent, it creates confusion, and it creates division among the rest. The key to restoring harmony is to identify and remove the source before the damage becomes irreversible. History, mythology, and even daily life, it presents countless examples of this principle in action. When a powerful leader is taken down, the followers, they lose direction and they collapse. When a tree falls, the monkeys scatter. When the head of a snake is severed, it cut off, the body cannot strike. This law applies everywhere, from political movements to corporate offices, from social circles to warfare. Take the example of Julius Caesar. He was a towering figure, commanding loyalty, commanding power. His assassination by Brutus and Cassius, it was not just about removing a man, but about destabilizing the entire Roman power structure. Without Caesar, Rome plunged into chaos. However, the conspirators made a fatal error. They did not fully isolate and eliminate the threat. Instead of securing peace, they ignited a civil war. The lesson, if you strike, you must do so decisively, leaving no room for resurgence. In modern times, consider corporate takeovers or political shifts. When influential CEO who resists change is removed, the resistance within the company diminishes. Employees who were once hesitant to embrace new strategies suddenly fall in line. When a political leader loses their stronghold, their followers scatter, seeking new allegiance. The moment the guiding force disappears, the collective structure weakens. However, simply striking down the leader, it is not always enough. The method matters. Some opponents cannot be crushed outright without causing unintended consequences. This is where the art of isolation comes into play. There are three kinds of isolation: physical isolation, political isolation, and psychological isolation. Physical isolation, it involves removing the troublemaker from the environment altogether. Political isolation, it reduces their support base, making them powerless. Psychological isolation, it discredits them, making them irrelevant in the eyes of their followers. A more relatable example exists in everyday life. In any workplace, there is often that one employee who constantly complains, who constantly spreads negativity and disrupts teamwork. They might not hold a formal leadership position, but their attitude influences others. If they are not addressed, their negativity infects the entire office. However, once they are removed or their influence is neutralized, the atmosphere, it improves almost immediately. The energy shifts and productivity rises. This law is not about being ruthless for the sake of power. It is about recognizing and dealing with sources of chaos before they consume everything around them. Some people cannot be reasoned with, appeased, or changed. Their very presence, it breeds dysfunction. The wisest move is to act swiftly and decisively before their influence spreads beyond control. Caution is necessary. If you isolate or strike too late, you risk facing an enemy whose support has grown too strong. If you isolate without strategy, their allies may seek revenge. Machiavelli wisely stated, any harm you do to a man, it should be done in such a way that you need not fear his revenge. Therefore, if isolation is the strategy, it must be executed in a way that leaves no room for retaliation. Ultimately, power is about control, and control is about influence. If you want stability in any environment, you must know who wields the most influence, who spreads discord, and who needs to be neutralized. When the shepherd falls, the sheep will scatter. The key is knowing when and how to make that issue strike. So That's law number 22. Let's turn to law number 43. Work on the hearts and minds of others. RajaRao Greene, in his book, The 48 Laws of Power, he presents law number 43. Work on the hearts and minds of others. This law teaches us that force and coercion may bring temporary obedience, but they create resistance that will eventually turn against us. True power lies in understanding people's emotions, desires, and fears. Winning someone's heart and mind, it is far more effective than trying to control them with authority. Power does not come from titles. Power does not come from positions or from brute force. It comes from influence. And influence is built by understanding people. Imagine you are leading team. You are leading a team. If you bark orders and demand obedience, you might get temporary results, but your team will work with resentment. Now, if you inspire them, listen to their concerns, and make them feel valued, they will follow you. They will follow you with loyalty. This is not a manipulation. This is leadership. Some people, they believe they deserve respect without effort. They assume others must automatically follow them. They bulldoze over feelings. They demand attention and they expect admiration. These attitudes do not create lasting power. They create silent enemies. On the other hand, those who observe, those who listen, and those who respond to the emotions of others, they build a strong support system. Think of a great teacher. Think of a great teacher, a strict teacher who punishes students harshly. A teacher who punishes students harshly, he might get immediate discipline, but fear never creates love for learning. A teacher who understands students, inspires them, and makes lessons engaging, he earns respect that lasts a lifetime. This is the art of working on hearts and minds. One mistake people make is assuming that ignoring emotions, keeping them in control. They believe that dealing with people's feelings is unnecessary. But resentment grows in silence. And when the right moment comes, those who felt unheard, they will act against you. Power without support is like a tree with weak roots. It will fall in the first storm. Instead of forcing people to agree with you, create a vision. Create a vision they want to follow. Speak in a way that resonates with their desires. Show them how your success is tied to theirs. Play on their fears, but offer them solutions. People resist control, but they embrace influence. If you make them feel important, they will fight. They will fight for you rather than against you. Think before you act. Do not make enemies where you can make allies. Even a small act of understanding, it can turn a potential rival into a lifelong supporter. Power is not about taking. It is about giving the right emotions at the right time. A leader who knows how to work on the hearts and minds of others, they will never stand alone in times of crisis. Law number 44, disarm and infuriate with the mirror effect. RajaRao Greene, in the 48 Laws of Power, he presents law number 44, disarm and infuriate with the mirror effect. This law reveals a fascinating strategy, mirroring your opponents to confuse, disarm, and control them. The mirror does not just reflect reality, it is a weapon of deception. When you reflect people's words, people's actions, and people's emotions, they lose their sense of strategy. They become vulnerable, they become overconfident, or even enraged, giving you the upper hand. In today's world, politicians, business leaders, and even common people, they use this technique knowingly or unknowingly. A shrewd negotiator, he mirrors the tone and body language of their opponent to build rapport and weaken resistance. A great leader reflects the hopes and frustrations of the people, making them feel understood. Even in personal life, mirroring helps in building trust and deepening relationships. People like those who seem familiar. Those who appear to share their values and struggles. Robert Greene describes 4 mirror effects that give immense power. The neutralizing effects, it confuses the enemy by making them feel they are fighting themselves. The narcissist effect, it flatters people by reflecting their values, making them feel admired and understood. The moral effect, it makes people realize their actions by mirroring their behavior, forcing them to experience their own treatment. The hallucinatory effect, it creates illusions. Making people believe in a reality that does not exist, giving the wielder complete control. But however, when misused, it leads to downfall. The mirror effect can backfire if the illusion shatters. If people realize they are being manipulated, they turn hostile. A person who mirrors too much, he loses their own identity. If you constantly reflect others, you risk becoming a shadow rather than a force. The key is to balance. Use the mirror wisely, but do not become trapped by the mirror. This law teaches us a deep truth. People are drawn to what they recognize. Use this to build alliances, to influence, and to win. But be cautious. The mirror is a tool of power, not a substitute for authenticity. Use it to understand, to connect, and to lead. Because in the game of power, the best strategy is not always to attack, but to reflect. That is the 44th law. Now let's turn to law number 45. Preach the need for change, but never reform too much at once. Power is a delicate game, a battlefield where even the strongest fall if they do not understand human nature. Robert Greene, in his brilliant work, The 48 Laws of Power, he teaches us an essential truth in law number 45. Preach change, but never reform quickly. This law reveals the hidden fears of people and the strategies to navigate change without triggering chaos. People crave stability, they love the idea of progress, but they despise abrupt disruptions. Imagine a river flowing gently. If you suddenly build a dam, it will overflow and flood everything in its path. The same happened when leaders force drastic changes. People resist, they rebel, and they destroy the very reforms that could have benefited them. History is filled with examples of leaders who ignored their principle and paid the ultimate price. Change is like medicine. It must be administered in doses that the body can tolerate. Even when something is necessary, like improving a system or revolutionizing an industry, it must be introduced in a way that feels like an improvement, not as a destruction of the past. History shows us that those who introduce change too quickly often become first victims of the backlash. Look at the downfall of Gorbachev. Gorbachev, who tried to reform the Soviet Union too swiftly, if only to watch its collapse before his eyes. Even in our daily lives, we see this pattern. A workplace that suddenly adopts new policies without preparing employees, it faces resistance. A family that abruptly shifts traditions, it experiences turmoil. A government that enforces sudden reforms without gradual acceptance, it invites rebellion. The key to success is subtlety. Keep the familiar intact by slowly wading in the new. When Apple introduced the iPhone, they did not immediately replace computers or existing technologies. Instead, they built on what people already knew, making the transition smooth and acceptable. Wise leaders understand that people are creatures of habit. Instead of tearing down the past, they embrace it while gently steering it people towards the future. They make small adjustments, present innovations as natural evolutions rather than abrupt shifts, and allow people to believe they are still in control. Look at how political leaders use nostalgia, referencing golden eras of the past while subtly implementing their own agendas. They borrow the weight of history to gain trust and legitimacy. The lesson is clear. If you want to create change, disguise it as continuity. Never attack tradition head on. Instead, make it seem as though your reforms are merely a refinement of what already exists. If you are too radical, you will frighten people and they will fight to preserve what they know, even if it is flawed. The past is a powerful ally, so use it wisely. Now let's talk about law number 46. Never appear too perfect. Robert Greene, in his book The 48 Laws of Power, he presents a profound insight in law number 46. Never appear too perfect. He warns that appearing flawless or superior to others, it can be dangerous because it breeds envy and resentment. The moment people perceive someone as too perfect, they start looking for faults or even attempt to bring that person down. Throughout history, many great leaders, many great thinkers, and many great innovators, they have faced resistance, not because they lack skills or intelligence, but because their success provoked envy among those around them. In in a workplace where a highly competent employee outshines everyone else. Initially, people admire them. But as the gap in competence grows, admiration often turns into envy. Colleagues may begin to undermine their efforts. They spread rumors and subtly they block opportunities. This is why it is wise to occasionally display harmless flaws or acknowledge minor weaknesses. It makes one appear more relatable and less threatening to those who might feel insecure in comparison. In daily life, this principle applies just as much. A student excelling in every subject, he may face resentment from peers who struggle. A business person who achieves rapid success, he may find competitors trying to sabotage their work. The key is not to hide excellence, but to present it strategically, displaying a sense of humor about one's own limitations, sharing struggles, and acknowledging help from others. It can neutralize envy. It is about creating the perception that success is achievable rather than unattainable. This law is not about pretending to be weak or incompetent. It is about understanding human psychology. People tend to support those they see as relatable, not those they perceive as untouchable or arrogant. Even the greatest minds, from Albert Einstein to Elon Musk, they have openly discussed their failures and challenges, making them more approachable and more respected. Envy is a silent force that operates in the shadows. It can manifest as passive-aggressive behavior, unexpected opposition, or subtle acts of sabotage. The best way to deal with it is to recognize it early and manage perceptions wisely. Instead of alienating others with an air of invincibility, one must cultivate humility and inclusivity. When people see that even the most accomplished individuals, they face difficulties, they are less likely to feel threatened and more likely to be supported. The path to greatness. It is not just about talent. It's not just about hard work, but it is also about how success is perceived by others. One must strike a balance, be confident yet humble, skilled yet approachable, successful yet grounded. When power is wielded with awareness and wisdom, it becomes sustainable. This law is not a call to diminish one's potential, but a reminder that true strength lies in understanding the emotions of those who are around us. By mastering this law, one can navigate the complexities of human relationships and maintain long-term success without unnecessary resistance. Now let's talk about law number 47. Do not go past the mark you aim for. In victory, learn when to stop. RajaRao Greene, in his book, The 48 Laws of Power, he teaches us an important lesson through law number 47. Do not go past the mark you aimed for. In victory, learn when to stop. law reminds us that success is not just about winning, but about knowing when to stop. Many people fall into the trap of overconfidence after achieving their goals, pushing too far and ultimately leading to their downfall. The moment of victory, is often the moment of greatest danger, because arrogance and overconfidence, they can make a person blind to the risk ahead. History is full of examples where great leaders, great warriors, and great rulers, they lost everything simply because they did not know when to stop. Take Napoleon Bonaparte, one of the greatest military minds in history. He conquered much of Europe, but he did not stop. Instead of consolidating his power, he marched his army into Russia. A move that led to his downfall. Had he recognized his limits and stopped at the right time, his empire might have lasted much longer. And one more example is Alexander the Great. He conquered vast lands, but he kept pushing his army further and further, ignoring the signs of exhaustion among his troops. His men tired and longing to return home, eventually refused to continue. Though he was victorious in battle, his inability to recognize when to stop ultimately led to the collapse of his empire after his death. This law is not just about kings and emperors. It applies to everyday life. As well. Imagine a businessman who builds a successful company. He achieves financial stability, earns respect, and gains power. But instead of managing his success wisely, he becomes greedy and takes unnecessary risks, expanding too fast or ignoring the warning signs of an economic downturn. Eventually, he loses everything. Had he stopped at the right moment and secured what he had already gained, he would have remained successful for much longer. The key to lasting success is strategy and self-awareness. Reaching a goal is an achievement, but knowing when to stop is wisdom. A student who studies hard for an exam, he should not burn themselves out by overstudying to the point of exhaustion. An athlete who wins a competition should not become so obsessed with proving themselves that they injure their body. A leader who gains power, he should not become so blinded by ambition that they make more enemies than allies. We must learn. We must learn to recognize the right moment to step back and secure what we have gained. The ego, it often whispers that we should keep pushing, that more is always better, ego says. But history proves otherwise. Those who understand this law, they avoid unnecessary disdain, they enjoy long-term success. While those who ignore it fall from grace. True power comes not from endless conquest, but from knowing when enough is enough. Victory is sweet, but wisdom ensures that it lasts. Now let's talk about law number 48. Assume formlessness. Robert Greene, in his book, The 48 Laws of Power, he presents a profound truth in law number 48. Assume formlessness. This law teaches us that rigidity leads to downfall while adaptability ensures survival. Those who remain fixed in their ways, bound by their own structures, they will eventually crumble under the weight of change. But those who flow like water, who remain unpredictable, they will always find ways to overcome challenges and seize opportunities. History offers us a compelling lesson through the history of Sparta. The Spartans built an impenetrable fortress of discipline and warlike prowess. Their society was a finely tuned war machine, unwavering in its principles and traditions. From childhood, Spartan boys endured a rigorous military training that forged them into fearless warriors. Their formations were impeccable. Their phalanxes nearly invincible. They stood against mighty empires, defeating forces far larger than their own. And yet, their downfall was inevitable. Why? Because they refused to change. Because they refused to change. While Sparta remained rigid, Athens embraced flexibility. The Athenians were not just warriors, they were merchants, they were artists, and they were thinkers. They adapted to change, responded to new challenges with creativity, and they evolved with time. Even after their military defeat, Athens continued to thrive as a cultural and economic hub. Meanwhile, Sparta, with its unyielding nature, is slowly weakened and eventually collapsed. The lesson is clear. Rigidity invites destruction, while adaptability ensures survival. Nature itself follows this principle. A tree that bends with the wind survives the storm, while one that resists, it will be broken. The river carves its way through the hardest rock, not by force, but by persistence and fluidity. Those who insist on fixed structures and rigid rules and predictable plans, they expose themselves to attack. Their enemies can study them. They anticipate their moves and find ways to defeat them. But those who remain fluid, who shift when necessary and never become too attached to a single form, they become impossible to trap. The modern world demands this kind of adaptability. Businesses that fail to innovate, they disappear. Leaders who refuse to evolve, they become obsolete. And individuals who resist change, they get left behind. The most successful people, they are those who learn to move with time. They adjust to circumstances and never allow themselves to become predictable. We must embrace the truth that nothing is permanent. No system, no strategy, no situation is fixed forever. The only constant is change. And the only way to survive is to flow with that change. When we remain flexible, we gain control over our destiny. When we become formless, we become unstoppable. So, these principles remind us that true power lies not in rigid structures, but in the ability to flow like water, shaping circumstances rather than being shaped by them. Mastering these final laws, it is about understanding that control comes from flexibility and survival depends on constant evolution. Thank you so much for